So at that time, you guys were only running one pool, and people were so nervous about you because you were also Annan. So I felt that podcast was like, to me at least, integral into like kind of, pushing you guys out there. You already had a large following at the time, at least for Cardano. And I look back at that tweet and it had like 150 likes or 200 likes. And that's your worst tweet nowadays, And, that podcast was great. I remember we got on there together, and I had actually done like a pretty confrontational podcast the week before with Occam. And so I was a bit nervous, because I'm worried about bringing people on that are going to take, people that watch my videos money. And, from the second we hopped on the call, like I could tell you were nervous too. And I just immediately was like, this guy means well, and that's what, it was a great podcast.
Yeah. And from my perspective, it's actually a year yesterday since I joined Sundae Swap. So it's kind of a funny story. I was just coming back from a small vacation, like a small 3-day vacation, and I kind of like crashed and was like passed out. And I woke up to an email like randomly at 5 a.m. from Mateen, our CEO. At that time, he was going by the name Reeve. That was like, hey, we're Sundae Swap. We've got 5 team members. We're looking to be the best DEX on Cardano. Would you be interested in talking to me? And I was like, sure, why not? And I've like fired off a response. And so I like started talking to him on Discord. And then the other founder, Artem, at the time going by Kato, gave me a call. And I thought this was going to be like an interview. And he's like, yeah, so you wanted to talk to me? Like basically treated me like I was already hired. And so it was like a really wild kind of surreal experience. And then like 2 days later, after you, I think, responded to that tweet, the team messaged me. He was like, hey, would you want to go on a podcast? And I've never done anything like that before. I like have kind of flown under the radar. I'm not one for the public eye. I've kind of become that person because I've had to for Sundae Swap. But for many years I like wouldn't even let people take my picture. It's just something that made me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I was definitely very nervous going into that because it's the first time that I'm doing anything kind of publicly broadcast or anything like that, and it was a very, very new experience for me. So that morning I woke up really early without an alarm, and I went down the street to the deli, and I got like a bacon, egg, and cheese, like to make sure that my stomach was full so I wouldn't get sick on the podcast or anything. So it was really wild.
Yeah, it is wild. And it's also funny, that story of, you getting hired, May 3rd, and then 10 days later you're on the Big Pay podcast.
Yeah, I think, at the time it was crazy to me because that video ended up getting like 14,000 views. I was like, how is it that 14,000 people have seen like a recording of me now?
Yeah, that's a good first date, a good first good first showing. Yeah, and I think your nervousness really kind of took my guard down a little bit because the con men that I've dealt with in my life, they're usually not very nervous,
Yeah.
So is that really just how it happened? You called Artem and you guys just immediately hit it off and started moving forward from there. What did they think of the podcast?
So yeah, I mean, that's really how it went. The reason I even got an email was Mateen went on GitHub and looked at the Plutus GitHub repository and looked at everybody who had forked it and sent them an email. And I hadn't even intended to fork the Plutus repository, right? Like I had clicked that button on accident. So it's like pure serendipity that this kind of opportunity fell in my lap. And the project was so young and so new, and we were still figuring out as a company how we were running things. And so there was a lot that was like, fly by the seat of your pants, like just invite people to be developers, no interview process, nothing like that. And so that was a big part of kind of what I contributed early on, was helping establish that process and that structure and that framework for being a real company. And like, oh, this is a real thing that we're going to do and deliver to market. And it slowly transitioned from this like kind of amorphous role playing as a company into like a real thing. And obviously now like we've launched and we're fairly successful. And so it was really that transformation that solidified our position as the company that we are today.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing that story, and I've had that experience with a lot of crypto companies, especially in the first year or two, the startup days and the lack of process. I mean, you can be speaking to a company with a very high market cap that seems very professional on the outside, and then they don't have the most basic interview processes. So it's good you guys got that in place, and for a cryptocurrency company, almost a little bit early, it seems like. So.
And then I did the podcast with you, and it went really well. Like it went over really well with our community. And then like a few weeks later, you were like, "Hey, I want to be a bit fair and objective, and give you I gave you some fear of missing out, and so I'm going to give you some criticisms as well." And that was another really big turning point for our company. So I think it was Nico who had tweeted about us and was skeptical of some things that we were doing. And so you kind of called out the fact that we didn't have a high quality white paper. Our team was anonymous, things like that. So that was like, we really appreciated that kind of raw honesty about what people were seeing of us. And so we said, okay, let's fix those problems, right? Let's write a white paper. Let's, Mateen and Artem at the time, Reeve and Cato, kind of reflected deeply. They were anonymous because they're pretty young. They're still in school. They didn't know how like the kind of perception of crypto would reflect on, on their lives. But ultimately, they decided, Sundae Swap has the chance to be something really big, and we want to be part of that. And if one of the things that's keeping us back is our anonymity, we have to let that go. And so ultimately they came out, we did that AMA, and I think it was hugely successful. And now the whole team was, revealed. And I think it built a lot of confidence with people.
It definitely did. And I actually had the same experience with my YouTube channel. I used to be Anon. It was just, screen cap videos. And then, eventually I realized to build up that trust and, a real connection with my audience, it's really important because faces are very important, and it's also good to hear that you guys took that feedback from the community and ran with it. And, I remember after that, I don't really remember giving you guys that negative feedback of the white paper, but I do remember Nico coming out with that. And I think that's one of the things that made me like you guys, was how receptive you were to community response. And you did it in the right way, because sometimes people are too receptive and they shift from the core value that makes them unique, and they shift for the community. And to me, it seemed like you guys didn't shift too much, but you shift in the right way to actually be constructive and build up over time. Which is good. Everyone makes mistakes, but go ahead.
And my philosophy on that is like, we're always, we're even. Maybe especially today, we're still receiving criticisms, and we're always kind of listening to them. And in my mind, you can never take criticisms directly on face value, right? And you have to understand what is the source of that river, where is that stemming from, and try to address that, right? And so sometimes we can't kind of just take every recommendation that somebody in the community kind of throws at us, but we can try to understand where that frustration or that pain or that criticism is coming from, and try to address that. And so that's what we just, it's a big part of our culture at the company, and it's what we always try to do.